This is not just, have a bunch of food storage in your house. This is be prepared for physical emergencies, be prepared for spiritual emergencies, and be prepared for emotional emergencies. And the more prepared we are, the more we can smack Satan in the face.
Can I just say, does anyone else feel like so overwhelmed by all of that though too?
How many times do you need to be warned that you cannot expect your husband's going to be able to be here to take care of you? He might be called on to take care of other people.
And we're going to say self-reliance about 1,000,000 times. So buckle up. Here we go.
One of the things you said that I really love was it's like, don't wait for a heightened crisis to be in a state of readiness.
One of the coolest callings I ever had was the service coordinator for our ward.
We can say we're self-reliant, but if you really take like an honest inventory, like how self-reliant are you really?
I don't really care how much money the church is giving. Show me how many people know how to fish now. Because the church's self-reliance program is uber successful at taking people from a place where they're relying on people to being relied upon by people.
Got our scripture notes up and running. All of the scriptural references used in this episode will be brought to you by scripturenotes.com. For a free trial to Scripture Notes, please visit the link in the description.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Women of Ward Radio. I am Brittany the Shadow. Joined with me via Zoom is Joy, Tikla, and Rachel. And before we get started, I just wanted to pub this wonderful book by our own Jonah Barnes. He wrote The Key to the Keystone, and Ward Radio listeners are going to be able to pre-order this book for like the next week. So the link will be in the description. Go get it. It's fantastic. Anyway, with that intro, Joy, what are we talking about today?
All right. Today we are talking about self-reliance. Okay, so today we are talking about self-reliance. Self-reliance is one way you can smack Satan in the face. So, what is self-reliance and why is it important? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has consistently taught that self-reliance is an important part of following Jesus Christ. It is about being prepared. It's about having faith over fear. And it's about making sure that we are taking care of ourselves and our families. The church offers wonderful self-reliance courses related to finances, emotional resilience, employment, education, and more. There's a lot of resources out there for learning how to be self-reliant. And there's even much has been said on self-reliance, but today we want to talk about the hidden benefit of self-reliance and some reasons why self-reliance is important here. And we're going to say self-reliance about 1,000,000 times. So buckle up. Here we go. If I could have someone read the quote by President Nelson.
Yes, I will read that. Okay, President Nelson said, "The adversary never stops attacking, so we can never stop preparing. The more self-reliant we are, temporarily, emotionally, and spiritually, the more prepared we are to thwart Satan's relentless assaults." That's a great word.
I love this.
Thwart.
Right?
I love that. Thwart.
We're going to thwart Satan. Here we go. And I love that he lines up temporally, emotionally, and spiritually. Like, this is not just, have a bunch of food storage in your house. This is be prepared for physical emergencies, be prepared for spiritual emergencies, and be prepared for emotional emergencies. And the more prepared we are, the more we can smack Satan in the face.
Can I just say, does anyone else feel like so overwhelmed by all of that though too? Like,
oh, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I got to prepare for like every which way. Like,
Yeah.
For sure. But I think so in the talk that President Nelson gave this quote, he was referring to Moroni preparing his people. And he talks about how he never stopped preparing. Even when, there weren't people trying to attack them at the moment, even when he wasn't in the middle of an emergency, he was still improving. And so I think that's kind of the thing that I hold on to in this of, it's okay if I'm not, I don't have a year's supply of food storage and I don't have all these things. Like, I don't know. There's a lot that I don't know, but I am going to keep working on it. And I think in this episode today, we will give a couple more ideas of ways that we can be more self-reliant. So
Joy, one of the things you said that I really love was it's like, don't wait for a heightened crisis to be in a state of readiness. Because if you're like, I'm only going to go into a crisis state when we're in a crisis versus a perpetual state of readiness, which in and of itself is a kind of lifestyle. I'd never thought about it that way. That's a really good point.
Mm-hmm. And to Brittany's point earlier, I think once you are even a little bit prepared, it does allow you to be a little bit more relaxed. Like if I know that my area is due for an earthquake and I've learned what things you can do during an earthquake, there's obviously only so much I can do. But if I have some level of preparedness, then I can have some peace. And I think that goes for all of the things that we're preparing for, whether that's our spiritual connection with God. If I know that he's there close and I can receive messages from him for small things, then I'll be ready to receive a message for a bigger thing should that arise.
Absolutely. And some of that preparation can be as simple as that knowledge. Hey, I know I've got that communication with God. We lived in Virginia. There are a ton of ticks in Virginia. I hadn't been around a ton of ticks before.
Oh, I don't like ticks.
Sorry. Yeah, no, it freaked me out. It grossed me out. And I was like terrified, as me and my children are trying to spend a lot of time outside. And there's all these had a lot of issues. But as soon as I learned, this is what you do, these are the signs you looked for, I felt a lot more confident and a lot more prepared. And so I think, preparedness doesn't always have to be stockpiling supplies. It can also be having that knowledge ready to go. In olden times, people were pretty much 100% self-reliant. If the crops didn't do well, you didn't eat. If you don't make it, you don't have it. And gradually throughout time, life has become a lot more complex and we become a lot more reliant on other people. For example, right now I'm reliant on my internet company. I'm reliant on my power company. I'm reliant on whoever made this computer, the company that made this camera, the microphone, all the things. We're reliant on these things, these companies, these people to make sure that they made these things correctly and they can function so that we can do what we need to do. Like hang out on this video call and make this episode. So I think it is important to note that 100% self-reliance, going off and living in the woods and providing for all your food is not the goal. That's not the target. And that being said, I do think we can be as self-reliant as possible and that we need to be thoughtful in who and what we are relying on. Obviously, first and foremost, we should rely on God. But there are many, many companies and groups that might not have our best interest at heart.
Ooh,
and we need to be
getting
thoughtful.
Juicy.
We need to be thoughtful about what companies we are supporting and
that's interesting.
what we're reliant on. Is this something you guys have thought of before or noticed before?
I mean, a little bit. Like I don't know, maybe it's the like raw pioneer genes in me, but I constantly am thinking like, how did they do it in the olden days? That's how I should be doing it. Like, how did parents juggle these things back in the day? And how could I do it that way? And then my husband reminds me like, it's okay to use modern conveniences. Like that's allowed. So I maybe err the other way where I have to be reminded like, it's okay to get a ready-made meal. Like you don't have to grind it from scratch. Like that's okay. But I hadn't really thought about if I'm prepared myself, then I don't have to be stuck reliant on a company that maybe is doing really bad things. I hadn't really thought about that. So that's interesting.
That was
I really hope you guys are going to talk specifics because I have no idea what you're talking about. I hope you're going to be like specific because I'm like, I
Who am I
I'm
supporting?
lost. So this is helpful.
Okay.
Well, I've also thought too about how we can sometimes feel helpless when it feels like, oh, companies are just selling us terrible things or like polluting the environment or things like that. When we have a lot of power as consumers, even if it's just one purchase, we send a message with everything that we buy. And so when you think about it like that, we have a lot of collective power. So
yes, and I want to keep that in mind, because when you go down this rabbit hole of like, what are the companies supporting and what are they advocating for, it can get a little bit discouraging of like,
oh yeah,
all of these things like
child labor and
all of the
pollution, yeah.
And it can feel a little bit inescapable because it's everywhere. So I just want to make it abundantly clear that you are not. You can make it to the celestial kingdom and still purchase from these companies.
No, goodness.
Like, it's not like that. However,
Are you talking about Temu?
I mean, that is one.
I feel attacked. No.
I held out for so long, guys. I held out for so long, but now China has my information. So what am I going to do now?
I actually have
keep getting cheap stuff.
I actually have never bought from Temu, but Shein or Shine, however you say that company, I bought from them, and they're kind of the same. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. You see a lot of their clothes at thrift stores now because they just don't last and people don't like them, and yeah. So all this to say, I think we can still purchase from some of these companies, but I do think we need to be very thoughtful in how we go about this and aware of what we're relying on and who we're relying on. To kind of get more into specifics like Rachel asked for, Target.
The juice. We want the juice.
Yeah.
We want the juicy
Target. Target's had several incidences where you're like, hey, maybe Target is not supporting things that I believe in. Trying to think of how to say this in the right way.
You're saying, let's make sure that in the process of preparing for the second coming of Jesus Christ, we make sure that the companies we are supporting are also aligned with our values in the gospel of Jesus Christ.
In the world we live in today, every company is vying for something. Gone are the days when you just go to, such and such store and that's all they do. You go to the hardware store and all they do are nuts and bolts. Like now, every company has its foot in the door of we're vying for these specific things, whether they're social policies, whether government policies, or whatever they may be. And I think it's important to be aware of those and to know what it is that we're supporting. So I mentioned
You're going to have to be more specific.
I know.
Like you got to put that, you know what I mean?
Hey, Joy, where do I shop and where do I not shop?
The chutzpah, you know what I mean? Like you came in here with guns blazing. Like, I want the tea.
I want names. I'm trying to be very thoughtful about it because it's kind of okay. So if you want to pull up in the Discord, where did it go?
Brittany, you're saying something.
Did that not go through?
No.
Oh, there you go. Pull up the one about Ben and Jerry's. All right. So Ben and Jerry's ice cream company. I know. I'm sorry. Ice cream company, like ice cream. Ice cream's good. I like ice cream. Be aware that Ben and Jerry's is supporting a lot of things that aren't just about ice cream. For example, Ben and Jerry's is talking about Black Lives Matters. Ben and Jerry's has talked about some pride things. Ben and Jerry's has talked about some abortion things. Gone are the days when companies stay in their lane of their profession or their thing.
Product.
Yes. I mean, we've all seen the 1.5 million companies that advertise for Pride Month. And some of these things are, I don't think they're problematic. However, specifically with Pride Month, that rainbow includes a lot of things that, I might agree with some of them. I might not agree with everything that rainbow stands for. And so this is where I'm just trying to convey that we need to proceed with caution with what it is that we are choosing to spend our money on. If you go to the picture of the Olympics, the Olympic opening ceremony, they recreated the famous picture of the Last Supper, but they did it with people in drag. And if you look at kind of some of the symbolism and things that they use, this was not in support of Christianity. So I personally didn't watch much of the Olympics because I felt like, you mock Christianity. I don't need to watch that. And I know there's some disagreement on, whether or not it was intended to mock Christianity. Be that as it may, this is just kind of raising the flag that we need to be aware of the many, many things that are going on with these companies.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I think you could also make the case that you could watch the Olympics for the athletes who trained so hard and all of that.
Right.
And then still send a message that, hey, let's not mock sacred things.
Absolutely. And that's why I don't think you need to come out with a hard and fast, you can't shop at these companies ever. Because for one, we might all be naked because there's nowhere that you can buy good clothes that might agree with your values. And for two, financially, maybe you could find this small boutique that fits, that advocates for wearing modest clothing. And that's great, but it's priced accordingly. So I don't think it needs to be a hard and fast. Don't ever buy from these people. Don't ever watch
something
these
to think about, maybe something that we can think about in relation to self-reliance. As if we support companies that have good values, then we are setting up the world to be a place we want to live in.
Absolutely. I think of the example of the Christian baker, and I am forgetting Jack Phillips. Nice little baker man doing his thing. He's a Christian, and people come in wanting him to bake a cake for a celebration that he didn't love. But he ended up turning them down because of what they wanted on the cake. He's like, hey, I don't agree with that. Here's some other bakeries you can go to that might do this, but this is, and he fought in this, he has been burdened with many, many trials, literally. He's been sued, lawsuits, and gone all the way to the Supreme Court, and this whole big ordeal because he chose to stand up for what he believes in. And so I think that's where, we typically think of self-reliance as, an emergency or a loss of job or a sickness or something like that. But maybe self-reliance is also there for us to be able to stand up for what we believe in, because persecution's only going to get worse.
Okay, I have something, going back to what Tikla said about, living in the world you want to live in. So this is kind of a tangent. Feel free to not include this. But something I've been thinking about a lot is food and fasting and word of wisdom, because I'm preparing for an episode that we're going to do coming up shortly. So I've been kind of deep diving into this, and it kind of goes along with what you're saying about being self-reliant. As I was reading the word of wisdom, nothing new jumped out at me, but there was a line where it said, it does not make the Lord happy when we eat meat, only in times of famine or cold weather or something else. He said there was 3: famine, cold weather, and something else. And it made me think okay, if we are to be self-reliant and good stewards of the earth, are we taking that literally? I don't think so. How many of us are not hunting for our own meat? I would say pretty much all of us, right? We all go to the grocery store and get meat, and we're eating meat breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. It's not hard to do, right? You have bacon or sausage for breakfast. You have a burger for lunch. You have steak or chicken for dinner. Repeat that every day. So I don't know, in terms of like self-reliance, I'm not saying we all go out and hunt our own meat, but maybe God doesn't like how meat is so readily available and we're not being good stewards of the earth in that regard. And maybe we need to be a little bit more self-reliant and, take more seriously the word of wisdom and eat more grains and fruits and vegetables, which he said has been prepared for us, and reserve the animals for times of cold and famine. I don't know. What do you guys think about that for self-reliance?
Well, I also think there's power in getting more in touch with the process of where our food comes from.
Mhm.
So like maybe learn what it takes to have an animal go from living to onto your plate. So get more involved in that process, even if you're not doing it all yourself, but go find out how that goes. And then if you still want to eat it after you realize how much happens, if you wouldn't be comfortable being a participant in killing that animal, then maybe we shouldn't eat it, that kind of.
Well, that was like, okay, so Ballerina Farm, when she was running in her pageants, her, not tagline, but whatever her little motto.
Slogan.
Her slogan, yes.
Yeah.
It was, know your farmer, know your food, right? Because they run a farm. And so I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And, if all the grocery stores closed down, what would I eat? I don't really have food storage. We have some, but not a whole lot. We have chicken, so that's cool, but that wouldn't last very long. But I don't know how to hunt. Carden, have you hunted? Do you know how to hunt?
I've done things you would never dream of.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that's a no. But so it's just like, I don't know. I've just been thinking about this. We can say we're self-reliant, but if you really take an honest inventory, how self-reliant are you really?
Yeah. And I think COVID opened a lot of people's eyes of how not reliable our supply chain. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
But the shipping and all the things and our food chain, and within a day the shelves were empty at the grocery stores. And
I just wanted to offer a perspective. So I had to learn this the hard way, and I hate to be beating a dead horse with the I'm a military wife, but so I just had to learn this the hard way. And I think this is maybe a perspective that we don't think about, which is I live in North Carolina, which is in a hurricane belt. And we've had two massive, decimating hurricanes in the time I've been here. And then another medium-sized one. And the one that really decimated everything, my husband was in the National Guard. I had two little babies, and I was incredibly sick with my third, and my husband was in the National Guard, had to go to the coast on Wilmington to do emergency evacuations. So I was actually in my home alone with little babies while the hurricane was going on. It's Hurricane Matthew. And I just remember thinking, this is so frustrating, because I was expecting to be able to rely on him. He's supposed to protect me. You know what I mean? But what's funny is it happened again. And I literally, around COVID, Joy had just said, I really had a wake up call. How many times do you need to be warned? Also, last year there was a gas shortage in the Southeast because of some kind of pipeline issue. And I started to realize how fragile the interstate travel and traffic is because of gas dependence, and how food supply between states could really be hampered. And for me, it was just kind of this wake up call. How many times do you need to be warned that you cannot expect your husband's going to be able to be here to take care of you? He might be called on to take care of other people. And when you think about the pioneers trekking west, how many of their husbands had to serve in the Mormon battalion? And these women had to figure out how to preside in their little family homes. And I think that's something to think about when you think about it is a natural default to think, okay, I'm going to defer a lot of those protective, providing responsibilities to my husband. If you have a husband. If you don't, you're already ahead of us, because you're already knowing you have to be self-reliant. But I think that maybe as moms, as women who have children, we need to be thinking in that mindset of, I have to be the first line of defense because he might be helping someone else. He might be called upon to serve someone. If we end up in a military conflict in any area, you know your husband's going to be needed. It's just, and I know it's probably not where you were taking it, Joy, but that was a rude awakening for me of just having to get in my own mindset of like, I cannot expect an emotional self-reliance of I cannot even expect my husband to necessarily be on top of this, that I have to like learn the skills to be prepped and ready for this because it's happened to me 2.5 times at this point.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
man.
and I think that leads into a question that I've raised on this topic, and that is, what is the purpose ultimately of having self-reliance in any of these areas? And I think the most compelling one for me is not even necessarily for my own comfort or my own life, because I know there's another life and I know I'll live again after this. I know I'll be with my family. Like, okay, so everything goes crazy and I don't make it. Like, okay. But I am more motivated by knowing that if I have my stuff together, then I'm in the position to help other people. And
Absolutely.
so if I'm in a mess, I can't help anybody. But if I have my act together, then I'm ready to go be the helping hands to help someone else who is in a situation that they weren't preparing for. And so that motivates me more, I think. So
That's actually the very first line. So under topics and questions in the Gospel Library Act, self-reliance, the very first line says, the purpose of becoming spiritually and temporally self-reliant is to better serve the Lord and care for others. So you're right on it there, Tikla. Rachel, I am so glad that you brought that up, that, we might not know what it means to be self-reliant. We might think we can rely on our husband to be there to protect us. We might think we can rely on the grocery store to be there to provide food. We all have these rude awakenings of like, oh,
That's
wow.
a rude awakening is a good way to put it. It is.
Oh man, like this is tricky. But something that I was impressed with during the whole COVID craziness was that, man, nobody would have ever guessed that we would have had a toilet paper shortage, right? Like that's not on my, and there is no way we can prepare for everything without the guidance of the Lord. And that is why, first and foremost, we have to rely on the Lord, because he's going to be the one, communicating to us, hey, maybe it's a good idea to buy a little bit extra toilet paper. He's going to be the one inspiring us with thoughts and ideas that will put us in a place to better serve others.
A bidet attachment for your toilet. You're welcome.
I think my favorite COVID meme was, I hired the neighbor kid to pick up poop in my yard. Took him a long time to figure out we don't have a dog.
Oh my gosh.
oh my goodness. Well, okay. I was going to say, we could talk a little bit about the church's self-reliance program, which I am a huge fan of this program. One of the coolest callings I ever had was the service coordinator for our ward. I don't know if every ward has one. I hadn't heard of it until I was called to it. I think our stake was particularly obsessed with service. And so my job was to connect our ward and stake with opportunities in the community. So I got to go to all of these like cool events and like rub shoulders with all the community people who were taking care of the homeless or taking care of the kids at school who needed extra stuff. And it was so fun. But one of the trainings that we got was about how difficult it is to actually truly help people who are in need. And we think that if we just throw money at the problem, then everything will be fixed. When in so many cases, money actually just makes the problem worse.
Yeah.
And so it's so much more particular and careful. And then there was a quote in one of the trainings that was from, let me put it, I think I put it in the Discord so I don't butcher it. From Wilford W. Anderson, who was a 70 who was working with impoverished countries I think he was working in Africa. And he said, the greater the distance between the giver and the receiver, the more the receiver develops a sense of entitlement. And that quote blew my mind because we think
that was
about
an amazing quote. Oof.
Yeah.
we think about how much I would love to just like send all of my extra cash to these impoverished countries, but it would not help. It's like the concept of teaching a man to fish versus giving him a fish, feeding them for a day versus feeding them for a lifetime. And so ever since there was that publication or making public of how successful the church is financially, I feel like there's been a huge attack on the church about how they're misusing their funds or should be doing more for charitable work. And every time I see these little charts or these little like, this is how much they have, this is how much they're giving compared to these other organizations, I think, I don't really care how much money the church is giving. Show me how many people know how to fish now. Because the church's self-reliance program is uber successful at taking people from a place where they're relying on people to being relied upon by people. And that I think is the hugest win ever. And the church is so good at this. We do not enable people. We able people. It's so cool to be a part of and to see happen. So, and at the end of the day, self-reliance is really God reliance. And he leads us on how to take care of ourselves so that we can help others. It's that. Put your own mask on first and then you can help everybody else.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Well,
and you think about how much time and energy and resources the church has put into even just the curriculum for those self-reliance courses. Like there's so much there. It's incredible.
Well, it's getting to the root cause of the issues. No matter what self-reliance class you're going to, it teaches you how to change your life, how to get to the root cause. It's not just slapping a Band-Aid on you. I mean, think about Jesus, when he was doing the miracles and healing people and changing people's lives, he didn't go up to the leper, rubbed some ointment on and said, okay, like it might come back, it might not. No, like he took it away. He cured the people. And that's what our church is doing is we're getting to the root cause. We're not just slapping a Band-Aid on and saying, okay, come back in 5 weeks,
Right. Well, and I think the church is also very uninterested in how we appear to the world to be doing. We care a lot more about the difference we're making.
Yeah.
I have a family member whose whole job at the church, working for the church, is to make sure that the charitable donations we make actually do what they say they're going to do. And if they're not actually helping the way that they'd planned to help, then they do something different. They change it up.
Yeah. And think about if every member of our church was self-reliant, think of how much good we could do to members of all different faiths all around the world. We could literally change it.
Yeah. And that's what the gospel of Jesus Christ does.
Yeah.
Like the program is great, but it's really couched in a greater message of the gospel. When you learn about the Savior Jesus Christ, you start to rise out of the ashes that you're in. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, thank you all so much. I have a strong testimony of being as self-reliant as is possible in our circumstances and also being cautious and thoughtful in who we are relying on. So consider that in your own life. Who are you relying on and how self-reliant are you? And we'll see you next time on Ward Radio Women.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. We hope you liked it, so please share with your friends and subscribe to our channel. Also, if you want to support us, please consider purchasing a copy of The Key to the Keystone, Jonah Barnes' latest book. It's available to Ward Radio listeners only for the first 2 weeks of pre-sale via the links in the description below, okay? You can always go to plainandpreciouspublishing.com and get your own copy of the book, or you can actually go to the kind of launch event that we're cooking up here. All the guys from Stick of Joseph, Quick Media, Jacob Hansen, many of us here at Ward Radio, we're actually going to have a launch event for this book in Utah that you can buy tickets for as well. And your ticket's going to be the book, so you get a book as your ticket coming in. It's actually going to be a lot of fun. So if you want to support the channel and you can't help us out with Zelle or with Venmo or with the Cash App, please consider purchasing your own copy of The Key to the Keystone by Jonah Barnes so you can be up on all the latest super cool associate professor of all things apocryphal happenings. Remember, the first 2 weeks only Ward Radio listeners get a unique link and unique access to the purchase of the pre-sale of this book. So make sure you check it out in the links in the description below. And as always, for this and more, please check us out at wardradio.com.